Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Spirit of Liberty broadcast. We are super excited. This is our final morning episode, which I don't know if you'll all be excited about that. That's it. We're done doing it in the morning. It was fun, but Sundays already wear us out. And what we are going to do is we're going to do fewer shows, but they will be more action-packed and done better. I would rather do one really great show than a few mediocre shows. So this one, though, will be great because, you know, we have an awesome guest, and we have guests today. We also have Brother Hugo from our church who finally joined us for one of these.
First time.
Been trying to get more guys from the church to get involved in this, and he joins us on the very last one. But we are glad to have Brother Hugo with us. And then, of course, Pastor Patrick Boyle,
Amen.
All the way from Florida.
Sunshiny Florida.
Sunshiny Florida, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where you guys...
Our governor says it's the oasis of freedom, and I agree with that. So,
Man, well, there's a lot of jealousy up here in Illinois. And Pastor Boyle was in for a rude awakening yesterday, spending the day in Chicago. That is a lot different than Florida, and even a lot different than out here. I mean, we turned Chicago upside down yesterday, and not with the gospel, but with all the rules that we were breaking. A bunch of us went into a gas station at the same time, and the people there just acted like, what is happening? And they knew we must all be together because none of us were wearing masks, and they were acting so violated. Out here, most people don't wear masks in the gas station. They all have signs up telling you have to, but nobody does. Yeah. I mean, but then out there, they were acting like we just totally violated them. And then, of course, we went to the restaurant, and then same thing. And it was just, they did not know what to do with all us rebels / country folks, whatever. It's like we weren't even trying to be rebellious.
My wife was having to console one of the hostess.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
if you were to die today.
Yeah. This is what a revolution looks like. Didn't you ever learn about 1776? I mean, you'd have thought that's what we were doing right there. Like we were signing Declaration of Independence, and but that's Chicago, and that is why. And, me and us, we were talking about this week about just like all the division that's going on in the country over this issue. But the thing is, and it's been this way for a long time, there is a massive difference between city people and country people. There's a massive difference between the East Coast, the West Coast, and like the Midwest. And in certain parts of the country, they really love freedom, where but other places they're not really interested in it. But now we have a system where they're making the entire country do the same thing that make us look more like cities. Yeah. And us country folk are like, we don't live in a city for a reason. And but there's some people, they live in places with HOAs where they tell you what color garbage can you got to have. I'm sorry. You tell me what kind of garbage can I've got to have, I'm getting me a triangle-shaped hat and a musket and riding the horse to town saying the British are coming. But that's us here. But anyway, we don't want to talk about that. But that was interesting yesterday, seeing all that. But out soul winning, though, I didn't have one person that had a problem. And I was prepared to wear one, and then it turns out I got out there and I didn't have one. Yeah, but I don't know what I did with mine. But people were still nice and nobody had a problem. But we went to the Inglewood area, and we were getting told constantly, "You guys be careful out here."
Because they've really amped up the racial division.
Yeah,
I mean, compared to like when I would go to Inglewood and the Garfield Park area before all the Black Lives Matter stuff, to now, I mean, you would get like the weird looks, like, "What are you doing in my neighborhood?" Beforehand. But now it's like they appreciate us being here, because the thing is, they love it when people from the church come out there and actually try to help them, because these are people that hear on the news all the time, help is coming, but it never comes. So when people come with the gospel and they're bringing a message of hope to them, they are really, encouraged by that. But now they're encouraged by it, but they'll give you the little, "Thanks for coming, but watch your back."
Yeah.
You're not safe here. And it's true. Honestly.
Yeah, that made me nervous a couple times. But how is it like that down in Florida? I mean, are you guys having much of the racial division and stuff down there? Or?
Well, first let me say
Violence.
thank you for having me. I've always wondered what it looked like to be in this room. It's just like cool, so it's pretty neat. But thank you. I am honored to be the last guest of the Mediocre series, and then you'll start. Isn't that how you introduced it? But
I wouldn't call it the Mediocre series. So not this one. You know.
No, but Florida, it's very similar. I would say our area, because Florida can be, if you go to Miami, it'd be just like Chicago, with the racial, the mask, everything. But our area of Florida is very similar to what I would say you guys have here, where the signs are there, but they're not making you wear masks. The racial division, that hype, it's all in the big cities. It's in the inner cities. It's the average common person looks past that, and they're talking about we're in a pandemic, and yet you go to the gas station or there's racial war, and you walk around. It's like you don't see it. All you do is see it on TV. But I think if you lived in Chicago, you'd see it. Right. If you lived in Miami, you'd see it.
Exactly.
But I think what they're trying to do is make it to where it's like they talk about it so much that it actually is in our hometowns. We actually disdain each other for the race or whatever they're trying to bait each other against.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So we want to get to our main subject of the day, because one of the things too, one of the reasons this is mediocre is the short time we have. It's like just when it starts getting good, we have to quit.
Yeah. And
that makes it really challenging. But we want to jump right into the main subject. So, you were a missionary to Romania for several years, and I've been wanting to do a discussion with you sometime, on the subject of missions, because, I love missionaries. I'm hoping to have possibly do like a missions conference this fall, I'm thinking. But at the same time, there are some major challenges for the missionaries. There's major challenges for churches too, who are looking for a certain kind of missionary. And, you hear a lot of people complaining about, the way the system is working, but you don't hear a lot of solutions, I guess, when it comes to these things. But I guess for you, you kind of representing the missionary.
Okay.
What would you say is just some of the biggest hurdles that they have to deal with, and how can we as churches like ours who want to be a blessing to missionaries and get involved somehow, how can we help?
Yeah, that's kind of a hard short question or short answer, but just kind of looking at, I think a lot of the struggles that we as missionaries, when I was a missionary, would face was the reputation that we had. We were looked at as fundraisers. So you would call a church and they're like, when they hear, it's almost like a sales call, like, oh, our budget doesn't allow. And so I think some of that is the blame of the missionary, because we're so focused on getting to the field, and the thing standing between us and the field are our funds. And so we're looking at every pastor as the next notch closer to the field. And the pastor feels that. They feel like, and you're a small church, you want to have missionaries in, but you're not going to be able to commit to supporting them. So you then therefore don't even have them in, because we can't, we're already at our max budget. So it's kind of a problem that's on both ends. And so as the approach that I took was, I just didn't look myself as a fundraiser. I just was preaching to any church that would allow me to preach missions. Just go, soul win, preach. And then if the Lord allowed them to give, then they gave. And if they couldn't, well, they couldn't. It didn't mean that they didn't like us. It didn't mean that we were a bad missionary. Their funds weren't allowing. So, but ours was a little more unique in the fact that we were on the field within 8 months from our first deputation. Wow. So we went under supported. The need kind of opened up. We went. But it was frustrating. I can remember you call the pastors and it's like you have the plague. But I think a lot of it goes back to we were pushing ourselves as salesmen. We need the funds. And I would say this, that there were probably 5 or so churches that they on the phone said, look, we cannot support you. And I said, look, we just want to come be a blessing. We're in your area. We don't even need any support. We're just here. Can we just preach missions? And then through the years, as their budget increased, we were first ones they took on. So if you could just, look past that, hey, we just want to be a blessing to the church, I think it would eventually create a better environment. But still, it's a necessary evil.
Right.
It's part of the weeding out those that are not going to, make it to the field.
Well, and, one thing, too, I think I can say in defense of missionaries, when it comes to that process of just calling all the churches like that, I mean, they're just doing exactly what they have been told to do. in Bible college. This is the method, this is the model. And the thing is, there's a lot of pastors that just don't like that. They have a problem with because pastors are very opinionated, right? We've all got this. Well, this is how I think missions ought to be done. The thing is, though, I try to be a little slow to run my mouth about it, seeing that I've not been in that situation. I'm not necessarily doing anything to replace what they're doing. Because I'm not sending missionaries out or anything like that. So I guess the thing is, though, one of the things that I hear a lot of missionaries complain about, especially ones too that end up like going out in the field and then like leaving the IFB, and I think this seems like a very legitimate objection, but they say they often feel like they have to be fake because you're trying to raise money as you go to these churches, but you always got to figure out like what kind of Baptists they are, because you always have these different camps, and they often just feel like they can't be themselves. And obviously, I think you just should anyway. But I mean, did you ever feel like, people weren't even really so much looking at you as looking at your association, your Bible college?
Absolutely.
I mean, that seems like that's a real thing where pastors only want a certain kind.
Yeah, and I didn't even know that going into it. Like I'm the first one in my family to actually be in ministry. As far as full time, we all were part of the local church, soul winning, things like that. But I didn't even know to the point when I chose my mission board. I chose a mission board based on, which was the easiest, fit my family best. I wasn't looking like I'm joining another local church. I looked briefly at their doctrinal statement, but they were just going to take my funds and deposit them into a bank account and file my taxes. That's how I looked at it. But little did I know later on that I was actually choosing an entire camp. Like you call a pastor like, oh, okay, who's your mission board? Oh, I'm sorry, we only support BIMI. We only support, whatever. And you're like, wow. And then they're like, well, who's your mission board? Oh, okay, well, that's a different circle. Almost like what Bible colleges you go to.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And a lot of students, when they go to Bible college, they go based on who their pastor recommends. But what they don't realize is that's labeling them for the rest of their life, even though they may not be ready to take that label. That was just, you're 18 years old. That's what your pastor said to do. So I think a lot of it has to do with just the stereotypes that pastors are guilty of.
Right.
But I will say, one of the big no-nos that missionaries, learn the hard way is don't ever the giving out of your itinerary. Like especially in a small town, like I'm preaching for Liberty Baptist this morning, and tonight I'm going to be 20 minutes down the road, and you're like, you're preaching for them? They split off from us 20 years ago. We hate them. And you're like, I didn't know. I just, you're calling people that meet the criteria on paper, but you don't know the history. And so a lot of times missionaries don't disclose that because of the fact that churches are so inner fighting that they put that blame on the missionary, and the missionary is just like, look, I'm not aware of your squabble. I'm not picking a side. They allowed me to have a meeting. And so they get stuck in the middle of that. But my encouragement would be, and what we did was we were just genuine, or at least attempted to be genuine. I was independent, fundamental, King James, soul winning. This is who we are. And we went into churches, on paper looked that way, and they weren't when you got there. But that's what I presented. And if they wanted to still support me, great. But the last thing you want to do, and you'll catch missionaries doing that. They'll Google you or go on your website. They'll see your marching orders, and then they'll talk that way on the phone.
Yeah.
Hey, preacher, we're just an independent, fundamental King James, and you're like, oh, wow, that sounds great. But then they do the same thing, to the next church. And so it's hard as a pastor to read through that, So that's where they go into the questions like, okay, well, who's your sending church? They're actually trying to figure out, who are you?
Yeah.
And so, again, it goes both ways. It's kind of a hard scenario to see, are you being fake? Are you just telling me what I want to hear? And so as a pastor now, I've learned not to say anything on the phone as far as doctrine. I'll say, so, hey, let me just ask some questions. Where do you stand on the King James Bible? Well, how do you feel about that, Pastor? Like, well, where do you stand on that? And then just get there, see if they'll give you an honest opinion on that. But it is a balance, and I think we're with you there as far as everybody has a critique of the system, but no one really has a substantial, this is how it should be.
Yeah.
Or if they do, they've never done it.
Right.
This is how you should do it, but I've never done it.
Yeah, and this is one of the challenges that I have too, is, there's a certain type of missionary that I would want to support and get behind. There's another type I'd rather not put my money that way, but that doesn't mean I'm against them or think their work is completely illegitimate either.
Right.
And so I respect a pastor in a church that says, we only want to support this kind of missionary. But it does seem like the missionaries, they often get kind of offended by that too. Oh, this church didn't want to support me, because, we do this, or, my wife wears this. And it's like, we're not, necessarily drawing a hard line and saying you're scum. But, at the same time, you want to put your money towards people that are more like you.
Well, it goes back. Remember, it goes both ways. So you have the pastor who says, look, hey, we don't think you're bad. We just don't want to support you. Well, then the missionary needs to look and say, hey, that church isn't bad. They just don't want to support us.
Right.
They need to understand that not every church can support you. It kind of goes back into, like, I would always look at it like the dating realm. Just because the girl doesn't like you doesn't mean she's a bad girl. Or just because she's a good girl doesn't mean she's the one you're supposed to be interested in.
Right.
There's a lot of good people out there, but you have to let the Lord orchestrate things. And so same thing with churches. And if you go as a missionary in with the mindset, look, they may not be able to support me. They may not want to support me, but it's a good church. I just want to be a blessing to them. Yeah. You'll be surprised that there's a connection. When the pressure's off of the church, we used to joke. I'm like, they'd say, "Did you know the missionary handshake?" I'm like, "What is it?"
Yeah.
They held your hand out, like, that's the missionary handshake, or the missionary prayer card draw. Pastor, hey pastor, like salesman, like, just be genuine. We would stay in the corner. We would go talk to the people. And when it was all said and done, the people were asking the pastor, hey, what about the Boyle family, man? Rather than following the pastor everywhere. And a lot of churches, the way they're structured, the pastor may love you, but if the church doesn't. Right. So missionaries have it backwards. They're trying to flock that pastor and follow him around, when the church people, they see it.
Yeah, well, I feel the same way too when it comes to missionaries. I want our church to be behind these people and to like them and to want to support them. There was several years back, we had a few different missionaries in that year. We could only afford to support, I think, 2 of them. And, I had my opinion of who I kind of wanted, but at the same time, I wanted to know who won the church over. I wanted them. I did. I wanted the church to decide. And you could say, "Oh, the pastor should make this." I didn't want to. It was my decision to let the church decide. And that's the way I felt about it. And you know what? Here's the thing too. The one that I was kind of leaning towards that they didn't pick. Looking back, I'm glad that we didn't pick that one. I will not name that individual. But at the same time, looking back, I would have had to make an awkward phone call not long after that and be like, "Hey, you stink. We're done." And I didn't have to do that because we never took him on. And he didn't know. I didn't tell him, "Hey, our church is going to be voting on you."
I always wondered why you never supported me.
Yeah, didn't know you back then. But so it is a real challenge, and it's the same thing too. When people call you, and this has got to be hard, just making those phone calls all the time, talking to preachers who don't know you from Adam. But at the same time, when a missionary calls me and I don't know anything about them, I want to know, what they represent, who they are. I don't want to support, the skinny jean trendy. I don't want to support the NIV guy and or a Ruckmanite. And and there's a lot of people too that are they look like us, they sound like us, but there's major differences.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time too, kind of one of the things that I was wondering about, did you ever feel like, and I guess you kind of touched on this because of like maybe churches close to each other, but it does seem like, especially right now, a lot of missionaries, they are afraid to go and preach for one person because it could get them in trouble with their own camp. Because and there's missionaries out there that they won't come here because, and they like me,
they'd lose all their support.
But they would if all of a sudden, I post on social media or they posted out, I was going to be with Pastor McMurtry. Yeah. Well, you post trip now. We're going to have to check your support. It's like, well, you know, and they're not, but that's how they feel, and that would just stink. I mean, I would think that would be, I would be interested in that. You know, I refuse to be fake and you know, tiptoeing the tulips and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, did you see a lot of that and think that was that reality?
We did, but I mean, the way my philosophy was, if that's how you got your church by your association, then that's how you're going to keep those churches. So we were just what I would consider true blue. Like, this is who we are. We're going to go wherever God opens the door. If you have a problem with that, then we're not your missionary. And if preachers could do that, it would give us a more honest opinion of who you are. That may cause us to like you more, or it may cause us to not like you. But then there's no fake support drop, you know. So my encouragement would just be true blue. If God opens a door and you feel like you should go there, because a lot of missionaries, you know, think about it from a pastor's perspective. You know, in a church where it's like a church controlled, and the pastors, you know, they keep reminding the pastor, we pay your salary, and we can. I knew one church in Ohio, they literally voted every year a competency vote on their pastor, and if he didn't pass, he would be kicked out of the church. So every year, can you guess, like leading up to it, he's like, "Hey, Sister Susie, I appreciate you. Hey, brother," you know. And but anyway, so imagine a missionary doing that, but now instead of one church like that, they've got 20, 30, 50 churches that are all watching them. Just be yourself, be the leader, and let the support come, let the support go. And I think preachers appreciate that more. So yes, there is a strong trend to try and steer away from certain churches because of the reputation or whatever. But my theory is, if God opens the door and you feel that's what's God's will for you to do, go be a blessing to that church. You're not picking a side, Right. And as a missionary, I'm not there to straighten out all their bad issues in that church. I'm there to preach missions and encourage them to go soul winning. That was my message. So I preached at a lot of churches that it's been a while. We were missionaries 8 years. And it's been, that was back in 2012 was when we came back off the field. So it's been a long time. But back then, social media wasn't like it was.
Right.
Now, every message I preached would have been live streamed. And you could go back and be like, look, he preached at this church, and he preached at this church, and he preached. They were all independent fundamental Baptist, but, you don't know. I didn't even care. I was like, look, I'm not trying to figure out where you are on all these issues. I have an open door to preach for you. And I was going to do that. So I would just encourage missionaries, stand on your own, do what's right. And pastors, the same thing, don't hold them to this standard. It's not like they're, they know the whole backstory and then they decided to go preach anyway. Oftentimes, you're the only one that knew that backstory. The missionary was just glad to get a meeting.
Well, I think it'd help if you thought about, just church to church, what are you supporting this missionary for in the first place? Is it to reach souls in another country on the other side of the world where you can't go? Or is it to carry your camp's flag to the other side of the world and preach out? Because the thing is, I wouldn't care about all these little random issues if I'm seeing someone that's King James only, soul winning by, soul winning, salvation by faith alone, everything like that. They're going to have a church like that. Because obviously, too, you go country to country. I mean, so I've seen places like, random countries, and I'll see the guy get up behind the pulpit and he won't wear a shirt and tie. And I'm not like falling all over myself, losing my mind. It's a completely different culture. They don't do that there. But it's like, if he's still preaching the word of God, if he's soul winning and it's faith alone salvation, then I don't see why an American church would really have that big of a problem with it. If he's really doing all of that stuff. But part of the problem too, I think people just get so sucked into their camps and just so sucked into the politics of the IFB that literally, I mean, this is so pathetic. Supporting a missionary to go preach the gospel to the other side of the world, you'd lose friends because of that. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, and the thing is, how much did your camp help you in Romania? I mean, when you think, the people in Romania, you're from Carter School, they don't know who he is. It doesn't help you at all. So, and the thing with camps too, and I get how it is, but even that's just not how I am though. If I see a guy doing a good work, he doesn't have to like me. When we were in Chicago yesterday, soul winning, I was encouraged, and it made me feel good when I saw flyers on the door there from another Baptist church. No, from another Baptist church of a pastor who emailed an invitation to his revival meeting to us. We decided we were going to go. He found out we were going to go, and he told us not to go because he doesn't want us post trimmers around there. And you know,
just sitting in the church.
and you know, he doesn't know me.
Yeah.
He doesn't know me, but at the same time, it's like, okay, what he knows about me, he doesn't like, doesn't want me in his church. But you know, he's still doing a good work out there.
Right.
I
talked to
I talked to a lot of saved people out there, and you know what? I mean, I even recommended somebody go try out that church. And the thing is too, you know, when you're in the ghettos of Chicago, they don't know about camps.
No.
They don't know about any of that. And
The rest of the world doesn't know about IFB.
It's really only known in the preacher world.
Exactly.
When I came to Rock Falls, you know, I could, you know, name drop all the people that visited our church.
Yeah.
Nobody cared.
No.
Where I came from, where I went to school, who I associated with. With one exception, about 3 years into it, we had one per family that visited that asked us if we were in this association of Baptist churches. And it's not a bad association. There's a lot of good churches in that association. It's where that meeting we went to where they promote that association all the time.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a bad group, but I'm not joining an association. And I've even gone to some of their meetings and I've enjoyed the preaching and the fellowship, but I'm not joining their association. And there was another church in town that was in that association, and so they went to that church because you know they were kind of married to that. But other than that, nobody cares about that stuff. They care about you, what you're preaching, and if you're ministering to them, they'll stick around. And so, you know, I think what pastors have to do, and this is where the work comes in, is you do have to actually take time to get to know these people, and that does take a lot of work. But I want your opinion on this. I think one thing that I've noticed, because there's some missionaries I've seen out there, I get their prayer letters, I'll follow them on social media and stuff, that they're not in my camp. They might even want to come preach for me, but I've like seen enough of what they're doing to know I'd be willing to get behind that missionary. They're doing a good work out there. You know, and I promise you, you know, even if they're from a camp that I'm not particularly a fan of, they're not over there promoting that camp, because again, that will do nothing for them in that country that they're at. But you know, preaching the word, preaching Jesus Christ, that does have an effect, and they're getting that done. And so it's like, you know, I get behind it. But so social media helps with that. But I mean, what do you recommend a pastor do, or what advice do you have to help get to know missionaries to see if they're worthy? Because even when you come to our church and you guys are kind of, you know, it's kind of like a, you know, probably feels like a Miss America contest sometimes, but at the same time, you know, how...
You didn't have any other analogy to come up with?
I've heard missionaries use that analogy before. It's just like a beauty pageant, you know, and you got to come through, parade your family around, and, you know, and if you look right and do everything just right, you know, they'll support you. But I mean, you know, how can pastors get to know missionaries, you know, without actually seeing them work, you know?
Well,
in that field?
that goes back to, and it kind of goes back to, you know, why the men are leadership in the church. You know, when the Bible talks about Eve being deceived and Adam was not, you can't make decisions based on how someone looks, how they treated you, how nice their family was. That's how missions is chosen, though. Literally, it's like, man, they're a great family. Well, I know some great Mormon families. I mean, they're nice, they're neighbors, they're friendly, but I'm not ready to support them because they're just so friendly. And so I think a lot of that parading around is what has come into the churches. The pastors, though, just because I doctrinally don't line up with you doesn't mean I'm against you, but I may not be able to support you. So you got to remember that. Just because I'm not going to support you, I'm not your enemy. You know, we're on the same team. I just can't. And a lot of people have a hard time, like, just because I can't join your church doesn't mean they're an enemy church. But the issue's big enough, I won't join you, but I pray that God uses you, and we'll just walk, you know, separately. And one day, you know, we'll see who was right on that. But we pray for their blessing. So the only way I know how to do it, this is how I did it in Ohio, was we would have a missions conference in, and it would be screened, like, you know, you asked all the doctrinal questions, they answered them, and oftentimes you didn't know if it was being fed the answer or if it was genuine. But then we'd have a time of soul winning, and that's when you'd watch, and we would and the last thing you want is like people scrutinize the missionaries, but just in a friendly, let's go soul winning. And what you'll find is a lot of the missionaries, they're not soul winners.
No.
And so I'm willing to overlook a lot of things if I find a soul winner.
Yeah.
Right.
Now there are some things, obviously the right gospel, the right Bible, but there are a lot of things I'll overlook. If they are a soul winner who loves souls, they're a rare breed. And so you've got to, be watchful for the soul winner. There's a lot of missionaries out there, and they're like, they're just going to be so friendly that the neighbors are going to ask them how to get saved.
Seriously. We were having my very first time soul winning. I took 4 full-time missionaries with me, and they, I've been wanting to go soul winning. I've just been doing door hangers on my own because our church didn't have a real soul winning program. Took 4 full-time missionaries with me, and we get up to the first door. I'm 17 years old at the time, and they look at me. I've never even knocked on someone's door before. They're like, Brother Austin, we don't speak English very good. Mind you, these people are literally, all of them have preached full-length sermons to our church before in English the entire time. They live in America, and they're just like, we don't speak English very good. I think it would be better if you knocked on the door and we were the silent partners. And so for like 2 hours, I had 4 full-time, we didn't split up, 4 full-time missionaries standing behind me, 17-year-old, never knocked on a door in his life, knocking on people's doors. And there was another time I took another missionary from the same place, and he was my silent partner out soul winning because none of them can talk at the door. And as my silent partner, he wouldn't even walk up to the door. He would just stand back in the driveway, and there were literally times that he was just playing on his phone, answering phone calls and stuff. And these were the missionaries that our church specifically lifted up as the best people.
Right.
And it honestly, I feel bad about it, but it just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Yeah. For all of that stuff. And I think that there's good missionaries all over the country that are dealing with just that kind of bad reputation of people that these people literally, they weren't soul winners. So you can't tell me that they weren't just kind of there for money, and then they get that bad taste left in their mouth. And then it's like, why would you support any missionaries?
Right.
And that's literally people's attitude.
That
today.
brings up my pet peeve. And that is with missionaries is the fact that when you go to that foreign land, you need to be culturally relevant. And what that means is they'll say look, we don't want to Americanize this Romanian church or this African church or this Filipino church. And what they mean is we want to do it a different way. And so I always think okay, so is Liberty Baptist Church in line with American culture or going against the American culture? The old hymns that we sing, is that because American culture wants it, or we are insistent that we sing songs, hymns, and spiritual songs? Dressing up for church, the order of service, the doctrine, soul winning, door-to-door soul winning. Yeah. Okay, we were in Chicago. I don't know how you guys were in a different area than we were, but there were some doors that weren't very receptive. Yeah. So it would be easy to say, look, door-to-door soul winning is not culturally accepted in America.
That's true. Right? It's not in some places.
So for instance, right? So they go to the foreign field and they'll say, oh yeah, we don't go soul winning here because that's offensive to the culture. You've not gone soul winning in America either then. No. Because it's offensive in America too. Yes. But that's what God said to do. So there are some unvariables. They have, soul winning is one of them. I was talking to, for instance, a guy from either China or Japan or some Oriental place, and he's like, oh yeah, you can't. That's going way against the culture. You do not just walk up to a stranger and start talking. That'll chase them away. I said, so then, this was during a question and answer he had already passed all the screening. And I'm like, oh, this is, I'm trying not to show him what I'm trying to get an answer because I don't want to feed it to him. So I just said, okay, well, what's your approach? That's interesting. What's your approach? And he said, well, we just be real friendly and one day they'll come up and ask us.
That's unbelievable.
And I just said, well, here's a follow-up question. Does anybody knock doors in your country? You know what he said? Yeah. Yeah. The Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah. And I responded with, I speak that to your shame. That the only one knocking doors is the false Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right. Yeah, and the thing is, I do think there is something to be said for, you might want to adapt a strategy based on the culture. So, when it comes to links, for example, some places might be all apartments and stuff, so you got to go on the streets. You can't necessarily go door to door, because it's just not possible. You sometimes might have to change up something a little bit, but at the end of the day, a lot of these people are always like, you got to be culturally relevant. When you're in these other countries, the churches that they end up starting look an awful lot like our hipster churches in America.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So it's like,
Which
you know,
are culturally relevant here too.
Exactly. So the thing is, if you were actually starting something that maybe just looked really different to us, and I was like, well, maybe that's just Romanian culture.
Yeah.
But you look like an American hipster in the city.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't believe what you're saying. I think you are trendy.
And then they just come back here, they put the suit back on, and
yes, and
That's
they grab their
wicked.
King James Bible, and and they know how. And I think a lot of the missionaries, and I don't know in your case, but what they're doing when they're letting you speak first, they're trying to find out how you lead some of the Lord, so that they won't add repentance if you don't add repentance.
Right.
But if you add repentance, they're just chameleons,
Yeah.
and. And I hate to paint with the broad brush, but that's as pastors, that's who we're trying to filter through. But and probably everyone here at the table has met someone in your life that you look at them and say, they are a soul winner.
Yeah.
You know it. You can tell the way they talk to the people, they love. And it's easy as a pastor. If you can work time to go out and go soul winning with them, you'll know instantly, like, man, these people love souls.
Right. Well, and this is another thing too. Again, because I've never been a foreign missionary or anything like that, I try not to have super strong opinions and then hold missionaries accountable for my opinions when they're not out of my church. And I know a lot of missionaries that, they graduate a Bible college, deputation immediately.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with that is, to me, you can't really know if they were a soul winner. I would have rather see somebody do something in America first.
Right.
Why can't they go be an assistant pastor or even a pastor of a church for a while? Because if you can't get a church going in America, what makes you think you're going to be able to do it in a foreign country?
Yeah.
Right.
So why can't people start out, spend some time over here, get something done, and then we know what they are?
Right.
Because what's the testimony too of a lot of these missionaries is they get out of Bible college, they get out there in the field, they get challenged. Turns out my Bible college didn't teach me anything. Well, they don't teach you much, and then they come back completely different than when they left. But you don't see that as much from people who start later in missions. And I've known some other people who, they pastored, they did other things in churches. They had a lot of ministry time under their belt, and then they went out there, and they tend to come back the same. And so I'm not saying that you have to do it that way and nobody can start out. But boy, it would help me out in knowing I can count on this person. Right. They've already proved themselves.
Yeah, we literally had a guy come in one time because this Bible college specifically that we dealt with, you're probably familiar with him. I don't want to name him.
Yeah, I know.
But they would bring people that were foreigners to the United States. They would train them to be missionaries, send them on deputation, and then send them back to their countries. So we literally had guys in there, though. The screening process had to be next to nothing to get these people in here. Because we literally had a guy come in. We'd have people that were already established pastors.
Right.
And then send them on deputation after this. And there was this one guy in particular that was literally a pastor and had a Bible college. And came over, training people in that other country. He left there for 2 years to come over here to go on deputation for more money. I'm thinking to myself, you already have a Bible college, you're a full-time pastor. What do you need this for? There's another guy who's also a full-time pastor who gets over here. He's preaching every once in a while. I think this guy was from Kenya. And he gets back and he sent me a friend request on Facebook. I accepted it. Well, after he'd been on the field for 2 years, I see he's standing at a big banner and it's his church and it's such and such Presbyterian church. And I'm thinking to myself, unbelievable. We're supporting. And it's you know how many people he's going to lose the support from over that? No one.
Yeah.
Well, he probably has the banner so that he can put it up for the next Baptist church.
Seriously. And just flip it
okay,
over
now
time.
take one for the Pentecostals.
Yeah,
All right.
we had a guy in there with this place. He wasn't saved. Okay. He came over here, just wasn't saved at all. He was trusting in a complete Pentecostal type salvation. Well, that Presbyterian pastor got this guy saved, okay? And then this guy would come and he gave his testimony multiple times at the church. After he got saved over here, our church baptized him. So he's been baptized before our congregation. We've all seen him. 3 months later, he gave his testimony again while that pastor wasn't there and claimed that he got saved back in that other country. It was over here and he's on deputation. It's just... to me, that gave me such a bad taste on my mouth for missions. And I'm just craving seeing a real soul-winning missionary that I can count on.
Well,
Man,
just
I
don't
wanna
lose
support
heart
that
because
kind of guy.
it's easy to get critical that we just all, it's just like, oh, we already stereotype everybody.
Right.
But there's true blue ones out there.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And you've got to comb through
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah, at our old church, we did have missionaries come through. The ones I remember were the ones that grew up in the sending church from ours. Like they grew up there. They went to school there. They taught the children there.
Those are good.
You knew them. You knew their work.
That's the key. That's what I was going to say because, and again, mission boards. I'm not saying you can't support those people, but the thing is, the people that have the most accountability are ones who are sent directly out of a church, especially too if it is a smaller church.
Right.
They pay very close attention. Where a lot of times with these mission boards, they just kind of get lost in there, and nobody's keeping an eye on them. And so some of the best missionaries that I know, their sending church is their home church where they grew up. I think that's a thing I look for. And so it's like, I know that church, I know that pastor, that Bible college, it's like, there's certain Bible colleges out there that have put out some really good guys, but they've also put out some nut jobs.
Absolutely.
And you don't really know what you're getting at, but you do have these individual churches that have some really good track records, and those are the ones that I look at.
Yeah.
And so, but you have to do work, and it's a challenge. I want to talk to you about this too, because like I said, I'm hoping this fall to do kind of like the same thing we did this month, but have different missionaries and stuff and things. I have a tough time getting missionaries to come out here because again,
they'll lose everything.
The political stuff,
Right?
And
literally.
so I mean, if I don't know, I thought, well, you know what, I'll just won't live stream those for them. But at the same time, too, do I want to support them if they're going to be political?
Yeah,
and I've told people too. I've got some people coming, here this year that they're planning on coming out, and I tell them, they know me, they like me, they don't agree with everything. But I said, if somebody takes you to task, I just say I don't agree with them. You don't have to defend a doctrine or position I have that you don't agree with. Just throw me under the bus. I don't care. I was like, we just want to help you, with what you're doing. We believe in your ministry, and and guess what? Timing of the rapture, and what you think about the Jews isn't really going to affect that much, unless you're like a missionary to the Jews. Then it might matter a little bit. But so I don't care about politics.
Yeah.
I don't care about that at all. But often these people do, and I don't want to be mean to them because I do. But it makes me mad that we have a system where they could come preach for me and potentially lose support over it. And it's just like
it's counterproductive in terms of what they've been told they need to do to get out there.
Yeah.
It's like they would like to come be a blessing here, but then it's like if I come do that, then I lose like everything I've made to get up to this point so far.
Right.
So it's,
and I don't expect them to go backwards, but at the same time, that so I got to look for people who meet all these things we're talking about, but also just don't care about politics, at all. And that that's not an easy thing. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But we're working on it. But very interesting discussion. Any final words before we shut it down?
Yeah, I think missionaries don't lose heart. There are good ones out there.
Absolutely.
And when you see one, you almost know instantly.
you do.
You're looking for a soul winner. And a lot of missionaries they start school programs and all these different. Nothing wrong with the going and reaching the school age kids, but looking for that underline. Are you a soul winner? Because a soul winner at heart is going to do a soul winning work, even if it is on the street, stopping people walking by. If you have to adapt. But they're going to go soul winning, and that's what you look for. I think it's easy to find, easy to spot. You got to comb through some of the red tape, but the political side, I think it's in every camp. Because even in our circles, there's people. Look, what do you believe about this? We have 10 major doctrines we're in agreement on, and then there's one little itty bitty. I mean, it's important what you believe on it, but we're fighting. Oh well, then. We can never even talk to each other.
Right.
So it's in every circle right now.
Yeah.
And I just think that's part of the game that we have to play.
And I feel like missionaries are just in the middle, and they deal with the brunt of that foolishness.
They're just sitting there trying to get to the mission field.
Yeah.
And then they're in a war zone in the middle of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like,
of all the Baptists shooting at each other, they're trying to get some money from all the different camps while not getting caught in the crossfire.
Oh man!
And so I feel sorry for them. Yeah. I really do, and want to help them. And so that that's why I don't like to even though there's stuff I don't like to be critical.
Yeah. Just
because I don't know what it's like, but I do want to be a help and a blessing. Hey, and if you're a missionary out there listening to this too, and you don't care about politics, hey, maybe call me up and maybe we can get you in this fall. And we'll see what happens. But anyway, definitely enjoyed the discussion. Looking forward to the preaching this afternoon. So this is it, folks. Final Sunday morning program. I appreciate all of you that have joined us on this, but you will not be disappointed with the next programs that we will be doing. They will be more entertaining, and it'll be great. So God bless you all. We'll see you all later.